Hello guys, and welcome again to the channel for that Mark TV's feature for the upcoming standard format post rotation with a new set BloomBurrow. And for today's archetype, it's going to be a very very kind of hot topic basically, because we are looking again at the mono red aggro, which I think has not really yet affected by the rotation, but instead got some new arsenals from this upcoming new set. And we're going to discuss today the main deck. We have two artifacts, the Oras Forge, which is before a staple sideboard card, which is now part of the main deck. We have 23 creatures. We're going to do a rundown in a bit. 12 instants, include of course the burn spells and some of these spot removals and pump effects, and 23 lands to include this new card of the tribal rock face village. So what would be our lineup now that we do take note that rotating out of the format are your copies of Command of Faces Kakasan and Play with Fire. But now we have some sort of a replacement under the same casting cost with this card, the Hard Claw. So Hard Claw is a 1 mana cost lizard mercenary. That's a 1/2, and whenever you attack with one or more lizards, this will deal 1 damage to target opponent. And it has this ability that you can pay 1 and red to put a transformation counter on Hard Claw. Activate only if an opponent has lost life this turn and only once its turn. So in a way, this is just like a 1 mana 2/2 because of its ability that it can deal 1 damage early on, and plus with this one it will deal a total of 2 damage. But upon pumping it, it becomes a 2/3, and then later on a 3/4, and then a 4/5, which is also a good mana take on this to have this one bigger, as your extra mana can be used to activate this ability. So we make sure that it can be consistent early on, so we have 4 copies of this in the deck. So also along with it are your copies of Swift Sphere, which is still legal in the format. So this is the version for the store championships. This is like a extra extended art with a good frame on the symbol, also of the rarity of rare. And also we considered still Phoenix Chick as a good 1-drop in this deck, as it can also do an invasion of the flying haste ability. It can be later on returned to the graveyard by paying these 2 red mana. So with that kind of setup, we take a look now at our 2-drops. We have added 2 copies of Champion Scoundrel, which again has a variety of uses depending on situations, but it makes sure that we can still have a good hasty creature, and at most it can become a 2/2 because of the Wicked Roll token attached to it. It can also get you to have some fix in your hand by discarding a card and then draw a card, and then can get you also to ramp with the treasure token produced. But also it can somewhat synergize with that of Godric because of Godric's ability of Celebration. If you're able to enter 2 or more non-land permanents, it becomes a 4/4 dragon, and Charming Sandler is one way to trigger it. Now for the other 2-drop here, we have filled on again. That's only 1 copy because you can also just fill in the curve for the hasty creature from 1 mana cost to 2 mana cost, and can also get you to have some extra cards exiled from the top of the library if it's dealt damage. And the Samatsudu 2-drop in this deck is the new card, Coruscation Mage. So this card will basically have you a 2 to cast for 2, but later on if you have it for 4 mana, you get to have an additional 2 and create a token that's a 1/1 copy of this creature. But the important thing is that it not only goes with attacking with this creature, but also having these triggers that whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it can deal 1 damage to each opponent. So an added value for the damage effects. At the same time, you can also have a good 2-drop and maybe a 4-drop in any situations. And again, having this upswing would also get you to trigger Godric's ability of Celebration, making it a 4/4 creature dragon with flying and can be pumped with the extra mana of the red. And for the 3-drop for this deck, which is included here, are your copies of Squee, which can also go wide on its own because whenever it attacks, you will create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that stop in attacking. and later on can be used to cast from your graveyard by paying 4 and exiling 4 other cards in addition to that mana cost. And the 4-drop, I've considered here a new card from this set, but do take note that it's still subject for changes, are your copies of Sunspin Links. So this card will basically prevent players from gaining life. At the same time, having damage can be prevented will also be sufficient in terms that you can have creatures with protection. So those protection effects would be nullified by this effect. And then when it enters the battlefield, it can deal bonus damage to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands they control. So any 3 mana cost or 3 color decks, or even the current 2 color decks using several of the non-basic lands can get punished by this extra damage cost from Sunspin Links. So that is your curve for your creature. And another pseudo creature source in this deck are your copies of Oras Forge, wherein you can create equal to the oil counters with the power of X1. This is a red Attrition horror creature token with trample and haste, and the more so that the turn progresses, the more of the oil counters added on it, and also a more efficient Attrition horror creature token produced, and then also attack at the same time. Now for your instance that is considered its deck are copies of course, spot removals with the form of Lightning Strike, which can also serve as a damage to the dome in the in-game. Anti-creature with the form of 2 copies of Witch Stalker Frenzy, which can deal 5 damage to creature and can cost less for each of your creatures that attack this turn. And I've also considered 2 copies of Torch the Tower, a sort of a filter or a filler for the 1 mana cost played by Play with Fire, as you can also deal with creatures and planeswalkers. And the extra mode, you can just bargain an additional cost to have that damage to 3 damage to the permanent instead, and you can go to scry 1. And to take note that permanent damage by this one would be exiled instead of die trigger, so die's effect would be nullified and replaced by this exile of this spell. And of course, for copies of Monstrous Rage, which is again a very efficient way to get your opponent yet a huge chunk of damage through the +2/+0 and creating a monster roll token attached to it. So to take note that prowess effects would also have a bonus pump on your creature, at the same time get you a monster roll token attached to it, making it a 3/3 or a 2/3 for example for the succeeding turns. Now lastly for the lands, of course I've considered still Manland as the Mission's Foundry is another way for you to get a creature on the board that can attack. And aside from the mountain, we've considered 2 copies of Rockface Village, which mean that they can also be used to pump or get your lizard mouse out or raccoon you control +1/+0 again haste. So in a way, the good target for it would be your Hardclaw, and maybe your Otter can also get a good pump of this effect and can also attack at the same time. So that is 23 lands in total. For your curve, you can check here below, which is average of 2 mana cost. We have a lot of 1-drops and 2-drops, but important thing is that you can still not miss your land drops, so that you can reach out up to your 3 mana cost to be able to cast Godric or Squee and do the huge damage output on the curve for that kind of gameplay, which is of course the main strategy of this deck. And last but not the least are your tokens. We have definitely 5 kinds of deck tokens here. We've Goblin tokens, Monster Roll token, Prediction Horror token, Treasure token, and the Wicked Roll, which is also added as a token effect for created by Charming Scoundrel. So I think this is much way of a look of your mono red aggro deck in the standard format after BloomBurrow is released, and we might see some changes later on. Maybe we can include also some new cards, efficient cards, to replace maybe Sunspin Links would be added only for the sideboard for long games against mid-range and control decks. But do take note that I think this would be your look of the typical curve of your creature lineup for this mono red aggro deck, as compared to how this would perform. We can have soon as the full set of BloomBurrow will be released, and maybe have some playtesting or online shuffling of our card draws and what would be your typical curve would look like. And any comments and suggestions are pretty much welcome, so do take note and comment them below on your posting of this video, and more so we can have more of these BloomBurrow standard deck text to follow in the coming weeks as the new set is released and become legal in standard to play in MTG Online and MTG Arena. So I guess that remains it, guys, for this deck tech. Do forget to like, subscribe, notifications on, and see you guys on the next video.